Welcome back. We're going to look at lesson 3.3 about loops in this video. Here we go. So loops are hugely important in computer programming, including for text processing, for linguistic analysis. The objective of this lesson is that students will be capable of using the for loop, as well as the while loop, to traverse or iterate over strings and collections like lists, which we will see soon in the next lesson. Okay, so let's start with the while loop. The while loop is a block of code that is executed repeatedly as long as the conditional statement evaluates to true at the beginning of each iteration. Right, so it's a loop in the sense that we're going to do a block of code once, and we'll go back and evaluate the conditional statement and see if it's true still. And if it is, we'll do the block of code. If it's not, then we'll jump out of the block and continue with the script below the block of code. Okay, so that's the idea of one of the major ideas of chapter 7 in the textbook Think Python that you'll need to read or have read already. And the while statement. All right, so let's take a look here at their example in section 7.3, the while statement. They put this in a function. That's what that line does. Don't worry about that. We haven't seen how to make our own functions yet, but just look at down in here, what I have highlighted in blue right now. It says while n is greater than 0, indentation, print n, then after printing n, subtract 1 from n. Whatever number is given as n, subtract 1 from it. And then go back to the top and evaluate this conditional statement again. If it's true, then do this block again. But if it's false, then jump out of the block and then continue with the script, which would print blast off. Okay, I'll just show you what this effect would have. I'll just go ahead and copy this little bit of code, jump over to Python and run it, keyboard shortcut. And I haven't given, I didn't give it an n. You see that it says name error. There's no n defined, right? I had it in a function. So I'll say n equals 10, a countdown of 10. Run my script again, keyboard shortcut. And there we go. So we start with 10, right? The first iteration of this while loop, n equals 10, so it prints out 10. Then it reduces it by 1 and goes back up to this conditional statement, says, is n still greater than 0? True. Okay, let's print out 9, etc. So it keeps going down until eventually n is not greater than 0, and then it jumps to the next line past the loop, past the indented chunk here, right? Past that. And so it goes to this. We get blast off. Okay, so that's a quick example of while. The logic's not too hard. You simply, once again, at the beginning of each iteration means a pass through the block of code. At the beginning of each iteration, you evaluate the conditional statement. And if it's true, you go through the block of code. If it's false, then you don't. You go past the block of code and continue with the script if there's something below the script or below the block. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, with the while, be careful not to create infinite loops. Let me just create one for fun. I guess it's fun for you. So if I were to actually change this to plus and say, okay, if n is greater than 0, do this. And at the end of the thing, I'm actually increasing n, so it's never going to get below 0. It's going to go on forever, right? It's going to be an infinite loop. I'll just do it so you can see what happens. Okay, I'll have to stop it, manually stop it. Let me run the script, keyboard shortcut, enter. And it's just going to keep going. 13,000, 62,000, 334,000. It's just going to keep going forever because this conditional statement right there is never going to evaluate to true, or excuse me, to false. It's always going to be true. So I'm just going to stop this. In PyCharm, you can stop a script that's running like an infinite loop with this square red stop sign button. Keyword interrupt. Okay, so let's have you guys practice this while using a while loop. Write a program that asks the user for a number between 1 and 10 and prints out from 1 to that number, each on a new line. Okay, so it's very similar to what we just saw here with this simple example from the book. Okay, so see if you can do this. Take a few minutes here to write this program. Ready, set, pause. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look at how I'd approach this, or how I did approach this. Right here, we'll do it. All right, so we asked for a number from the user, right? Be so kind as to give me a number between 1 and 10. And then we have to convert the number to an int, because what comes back from an input call to the input function is a string, data type string. And so we need to convert that to an integer so we can do this comparison down here. Okay. So we convert the number to an int, that is integer data type. Then we create a variable called counter equals 0. So while counter is less than number, first we're going to increase the counter by 1. This right here, this plus equal sign, is a shorthand for counter equals counter plus 1, which means take the current value of counter, add 1 to it, and then save it back to itself with the same variable name. Right, this is a little shorthand of that, which means just take the current value of 1 and add 1. Excuse me, take the current value of counter and add 1 to it and save it back to that variable name, counter, and then print. Okay, so let me run the script. Keyboard shortcut, enter. Please be so kind as to give me a number between 1 and 10. I'll give it 5. And there we have it. It did it very quickly. So yeah, it came in here with the counter of 0, but then it immediately pushed it up to 1 and then printed out that 1 right there on the first iteration of this loop, the first pass through the block of code. On the second, it went up to 2, etc. And when it got to 5, it printed out 5, right? And it came in here, and the number I gave it was 5, right? So the counter was 5. So while counter is less than number, so while 5 is less than 5, which is not the case, that evaluated to true. So then it just stopped running the code. All right, if you'd like to pause the video and take a look at what I'm doing here, I want you to do so now. All right, let's move on to the next one. It says, while using a while loop, write a program that asks the user to write a sentence and then asks the user to give a single letter with a different call to input, and prints out the sentence, 1 letter on a line, until the letter given by the user is encountered, at which point the loop is exited and no more of the sentence is printed. If the letter given by the user doesn't occur in the sentence, the whole sentence should print out. And you're going to need the break keyword. So look up the break keyword. Okay, so take a few minutes here to try this little practice exercise. Ready, set, pause. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look at how we approach, how I would approach this. Let me just get this over to this. Let's look at the logic of the code first. First, I want a sentence from the user. Please write a sentence, whatever sentence will do. Then please give me a letter. So I say these are different variable names over here, right? On line 2, I say sentence equals the input sentence. User letter equals the input letter. And then I get the number of characters in the string with the len function. This on line 4 here, this len function is a new function we haven't seen yet. It gives you the length of a collection. And a string is actually a collection of characters. This can also apply to lists that we'll see in the next lesson. But it's giving me the number of characters in that sentence, including white space, right? Spaces and periods and whatever. Then we have a counter of 0. We define a counter of 0. We say while counter is less than the number of characters in the sentence, we're going to string slice 1 character at a time. So we're going to actually go in and just string slice, like we saw in a lesson or 2 ago, grab one character out of the sentence and then print it, and then increase the counter by 1. Okay, and if the current character that we pulled out with the string slice on line 7, if a lowercase version of it is equal to a lowercase version of the letter given by the user, then break out of this while loop. So the break keyword is a special keyword that'll break out of a loop, whether a while loop or a for loop. We'll look at for loops in a second. Okay, so let me run this script. And I like languages. Please give me a letter. I'll give it G. There we go. I like lang. So it stopped printing that lang. Now it's not quite doing exactly what I asked you to do in the, say, one letter on a line. So let me make that work. So the default end parameter of the print function is a new line break. So let me just pull this out for a moment. I'll rerun the script and do that again. I like languages. Give me a letter. So there we go. Now it's one character per line. Okay. And then it stops at the first G that it found. Okay. If you'd like to pause the video and look at my code here, this is on the solutions file as well on the CMS. Okay. The next little modification, well, I'll show you the next. I don't think I say here, but what I had before in the print statement here, this print function, right? I'm printing out the current character, comma, end equals, and then I say nothing between. Whoops, daisy. 1 second. I have double quotes with nothing between it, so it says print it out, but then don't put anything after it. Just get ready for the next thing that is going to print out. So this is what I did the first time. I'll just do it again real quick so you can see the effect again. I like languages, period, give you a G, and it prints it out horizontally because it's not going to make a new line. The default parameter for, or the default argument for end is a new line break. Right. So if you want to overwrite that, you can do so with end equals some other character. In this case, I just want it to print out horizontally to the right. Okay. If you'd like to pause video and look at that a bit more and experiment with that on your computer, now would be a good time to pause video. Okay, let's keep rolling here. Okay, the for loop is also a highly useful loop in Python, and it executes a block of code for each element of a string or collection, and a string is a collection of characters. Okay, so let's look at an example of printing every letter in a string from the textbook, from section 8.3 of the textbook. Traverse with the for loop. So here's a review of the while loop there. Let's jump down to here. And so you have the keyword for variable name. The letter here is a variable name that we choose, whatever variable name we want to choose. They're doing something very transparent and saying letter, because each element of this string is going to be a letter, or yeah. Okay, so let's just try this real quick. If I grab this little bit of code, copy it over to my script in here. And I don't have a fruit variable defined yet, right? So I need to define fruit. I'll just say fruit equals mango, or mango in Spanish. So let me do that. And it stops once the loop reaches the last element of the collection, the string in this case, it breaks out of the loop and is done. Right? If we really want to verify that, we could put a little print statement saying all done. I'll rerun the script, keyboard shortcut, enter, and there we get it. So once it reached the last element of this string, which is in itself a collection of characters, it finished, it just broke out of the loop and went to the next line, which was line 4, and printed that. So what happened was it actually ran line 3 5 times because there are 5 elements in this collection, the string. And during each iteration, it went to the next letter. So the first iteration, it had M as the value of the variable letter. And then on the second iteration, it had A as the value of the variable letter in here. So that's why we get these on different lines like that. Okay. If I'd like to pause the video and take a look at that, go ahead and do so now. Okay, let's take a look at some practice. It says write a program that asks the user for a word with at least 8 letters and then prints on a new line each letter in the word. Well, we pretty much did that. I'm not going to give you any time for that. We pretty much did that. And there it is. I guess we can do it for completeness sake here. So it's an interactive script, right? It's going to ask input to give me something from the user. I'll run the script, the keyboard shortcut, enter. I'll give it a long word here. University comes to mind. There we go. Print university, 1 word per line. Pretty much it's identical to what we saw. Although in the previous one, I just hard coded the word that we would traverse over, iterate over. Here I got it interactively from the user with the input function. Okay. Modify the previous program so that only consonants are printed. Interesting. And we're going to need to look up the continue keyword. Okay, look up the continue keyword as well as the in operator. All right, so give that a try. Give a good faith, honest effort to doing this. Modify the previous program so only consonants are printed. Ready, set, pause. All right, welcome back. Let's see how we can do this. Modify the previous program so only consonants are printed. And here is how I would approach this. Okay. So what we have here is we have input coming in from the user, some long word or some word of 8 letters or more. And then we loop over it with the for loop, right? We have the head of the for loop there. Indentation is important here. In Python, indentation is meaningful and you have to have it for it to work correctly. In other programming languages, that's not always the case, or I can't think of another programming language where that is the case. So this says if, then I have an if statement within the for loop. If the letter that we're currently looking at is in this is called a list, we'll see soon, square brackets with 5 orthographic vowels. If that is the case, then continue. Continue means jump to the next iteration of this loop that you're currently in. So if I'll show here in a second, if I give it like university, the U is in this thing. So it would not print out university because it would come here. It would say, oh yeah, this if I was true. So I'm going to continue, which means I'm going to jump to the next iteration in the for loop, which means the next letter in that string, university. So it's not going to print U. And it'll get to N, and it'll look at this again and say, okay, is the current letter N in this collection of 5 letters? No, that evaluates to false. So it's not going to run line 5. It's going to jump down here and just go to 6 immediately. Okay, so let me just run this. I'll just try it again. I'll just go university. And what do we have? We have N, V, R, S, T, Y. Yep. So once again, it did not print out the vowels because it found the vowels in this thing, and that means that it would run continue, which means go to the next iteration of the loop before it even gets down to line 6. So it's not going to run line 6 because it's going to continue the next iteration first if the current letter we're looking at is a vowel. Okay. I'd like to pause the video, do so now. All right, let's see what we got next. Modify the previous program so that both consonants and vowels are printed, but with vowels in uppercase. Hint, don't forget the string method .upper. Okay, so pause the video and try that for a few minutes. Ready, set, pause. All right, let's take a look at how I approach this. Oh yeah, there's another way to do the previous exercise if you like to look at that in the solution file. Let's try this. So what this says is we're going to get a word from the user. We're going to go into a for loop with this head of the for loop, right? And so letter is going to be the variable name that we give to each element of the word that comes in from input. And then if the current letter is one of the 5 orthographic vowels, lowercase, that is, then push that letter to upper with the upper here, and then print out the letter. So by the time it comes out of the if statement, these 2 lines right here, vowels will have been pushed to uppercase, but consonants won't have been pushed to uppercase. So let's try that. Run the script, keyword shortcut, enter. I'll just give it university just to stick with that for a bit. All right, let's take a look here. So yeah, we've got uppercase U, lowercase n, uppercase I, lowercase v, uppercase e, etc. Okay, so the consonants are lowercase and the vowels are uppercase. Orthographic vowels, right? So that Y actually is a vowel sound in pronunciation, but it's not in this list here. And we could add that, but anyway. So take a look at that. If you'd like to pause the video now, it would be a good time. All right. Next little modification says, so that instead of printing on new lines, each letter is printed next to each other as words are normally are. So we actually saw this above in the while. This one's pretty easy. Just on this print statement, right? You do comma end equals open double quote, closing double quote with no space, no nothing in there, no nothing, without anything in there. Let me go to university. There we go. So there you go. So it puts it out on horizontally like we would expect, right? Okay, so if I'd like to pause video, do so now. All right, here's a little formative quiz to finish this lesson. It says, determine how many times Hola Mundo will print to the screen in each of the following blocks of code. Okay, so here's block 1. Let's just look through the block first, then we'll try it in Python. Let's just think through this. Actually, you do it first. Take a minute here, pause the video, take a minute to look at this block of code, block 1, and guess how many times Hola Mundo is going to print out. Don't worry about the pass. The pass is simply letting it go through to the next, letting it go down to the next line of code. If you didn't have the pass there, it would error out and say, hey, you don't have anything going on here with this for loop. So anyway, just look at this. What is this going to do? So range 2 means it's going to do 2 loops. 2 loops of this I loop. And then range 2 again is going to do 2 loops of the for loop, excuse me, of the J loop, right? So take a minute here and go ahead and just look at all 3 of these blocks at the same time. All right, so we're trying to figure out how many times Hola Mundo is going to print out looking at these 3 blocks. Go ahead and pause the video, pause. Okay, so let's think through this. We're gonna go through this I for loop twice. Within each iteration of the I loop, I for loop, we're gonna have 2 iterations of a J for loop. Once again, these right here are just variable names that I chose. They can just be any well-formed variable name. So that means when we come into the first iteration of the I loop, the I for loop, we'll come into the J, right, for loop, and we'll do that twice. So the first iteration of the J will print out Hola Mundo, and then the second iteration of this J loop will print out Hola Mundo, and then it'll be done with this J loop. So I'll come back up here to the I for loop, and it'll do the second iteration of that I for loop, right? And it'll come in here, it'll hit the J for loop and do hola mundo on the first iteration, hola mundo on the second iteration of the J loop. And once it's done with that, it'll come back up here and it'll be done with the I loop as well. Okay, so let's try that. So it should print out hola mundo 4 times, which is hello world, by the way, in Spanish. Yeah, we got 4 hola mundos right here. Because this was hit 4 times, right? This happened 4 times. All right. How about block 2? Block 2, this print statement is actually not within the scope of this for loop, the J for loop. So this J for loop is not going to print that out. So it's only going to print out with the I for loop. Because the I for loop goes through twice, right? It has 2 iterations. It should only print out twice. So the J for loop is not going to do anything to that print statement. They're not going to execute it. Let's try that hypothesis. So this should print out twice. Keyboard shortcut here. Yeah, only 2 iterations of, only 2 print statements of hola mundo. All right, and now here, how about this one? So this print statement is actually lined up with the for loop with the I variable, right? And this one right here. So it's going to come through here and it's going to do this for loop twice. During each iteration of that I for loop, it's going to do the J for loop twice. But because this print statement is lined up with this I for loop, it's not going to run this until the I for loop is done, right? So this should only print once because it'll just do the two J for loops, the 2 iterations of the J for loop within each iteration of the 2 iterations of the I for loop. So it's just going to do these loops without printing anything. And once it's done with both of those loops, it's just going to print out hola mundo once. So this should just be once. Just one print statement should happen here. Yep, just one, hola mundo. So once again, indentation is vitally important in Python. You really need to pay attention to your indentations with for loops and if statements, while loops, and we'll see in the future function definitions. Okay, so you really need to pay attention. Where is this thing lined up with? Which means, okay, this print statement is not going to happen until these for loops are done. So it's just going to print once. Once it hits line 6, it's only going to do it once. But if I had this thing indented one level to be lined up with this for loop, right? It is going to happen twice because this for loop with I happens twice. But it's not going to be affected by the J for loop because it's lined up with that J for loop. Meaning the same amount of indentation on line 4 is seen on line 6. I'll just show that to be very explicit. So this should print out twice. Yep, twice. So that printed out with each iteration of the I for loop. Now, if I indent it one more time, right, this should actually print out with every iteration of the J for loop, which is 2 iterations, and during each iteration of the I for loop, the J for loop happens. So it's 2 times 2, right? This happens twice in each of the 2 iterations of this for loop. So 2 times 2 is 4. So once again, we saw that earlier. There they are. Okay, so I just can't stress enough, especially those who have a previous experience with programming, you need to make sure you look at your indentation very closely in Python. And understanding why you have certain levels of indentation, depending on what you want the script to do. Okay, so that is a quick rundown of lesson 3.3 about loops. We saw the while loop, which you have to break out of somehow. Use the break function, the break keyword, or you can increment a counter and say only do this loop while n is less than some number or greater than some number, usually less than. We saw the for loop, which is really useful because it iterates over every element of a collection, like a string is a collection of characters. All right, those are the two workhorse loops in computer programming, and including Python for string for text processing. All right. See you next time.